What's a baker's favorite Broadway play? Yeast Side Story. So I know you when we worked together at the theater downtown.
That's correct.
And I knew that you had worked at the bakery as well. How did you go from working at the theater and, casually working at the bakery with your family to owning it and running it yourself?
It was a transition of about almost 2 years, I think, before we finally moved into the idea of that we would be taking it over. It was at least 18 months anyways, because I worked with Theo and Gerda, the previous owners, for that long. But we'd been coming to the bakery for 6 years before that, so it's not like we didn't know the family, and it had always been like a family part of it because of my uncle, who was their sourdough baker previous to me. It just started with that being part of the Western Fair Market Association, and then just right into the bakery itself.
What do you find about running your own business that you didn't expect?
Didn't expect the challenges to always come so fast, so hard all the time. But I think that's just part of learning how to have patience in a managerial style rather than just working for somebody else and accepting that that's the command that you have to do. But I also try to keep it family style. We're more of a team and a family with even the employees that are with us. So I think that was probably what I didn't expect, is that you'd really become a tight-knit family. I would say that was not something I expected, but I do really appreciate my employees in that way. So
it kind of seems like that kind of profession and the work that you do in a bakery would aid itself to making it feel like a family, because it's like you're making things together.
Yeah, it's a lot like building a puzzle together, or putting a tent together with a family. Those little aspects of the team building create a familiar feeling. I think that's why you have friends that become family in your life, right?
Sort of the other side of the coin, a number of years ago, the minimum wage went up. How, when you got started, did you manage to balance your employees being your friends and like a family, and also on the other side, trying to navigate costs to businesses around?
I think that what you're seeing around the province is old family restaurants and whatnot are really having problems. We did at the beginning of COVID as well, and we also have a massive construction project out in front of us at the same time. So I think that looking ahead and thinking long-term, as well as dealing with what you can do in the immediate and using those things and balancing those things, it's tough, but you learn to do it. You can't run a successful business without it. I wouldn't say necessarily that we're 100% successful all the time. We do have our failures.
Artisan Bakery, you opened up on the east side of town where King meets Dundas.
Yeah, Ontario and King and Dundas, that's right.
I drive by there a little bit every once in a while, and it's a really nice looking building, nice facade. I like the windows. I see your posts online of really delectable things. How have you been received in the Old East Village?
I think very well. I know a lot of people think of downtown as like Richmond, right? But it does really extend this far out Dundas, right to Kellogg's Lane almost. Being part of that downtown core in the Old East Village is very unique. I believe there's 4 coffee shops and bakeries, and now a bakery tavern that's going to be replaced at the old Regis, the Backroads Bakery and Tavern. We all support each other. We're not here just to make money. We're here to be part of a community, to avoid what hopefully gets to be the old way of thinking, bringing Starbucks and the McDonald's and whatnot onto our block. We're keeping it old school. We're building old ale houses, we're building tap houses, we're building a museum in this corridor. There'll be retro apartments geared to lower income right through to high end. Not necessarily going to gentrify the area, which is my hope. It will actually encompass the community that's already here and some of the impoverished people and even the homeless in this community.
From what I understand, you work with homeless organizations with the bread that you no longer use?
That's correct. Yeah, we give that to the ARC. They're a community program that gives out free meals to the homeless and to those that are not able to support themselves. The methamphetamine crisis and the fentanyl crisis in all of our communities across the world, really.
It's good that it's not wasteful. It gets to the people that might need something like that. So the huge elephant in the room, obviously, is COVID. How are you affected by COVID? What sort of challenges did you have to overcome?
For me personally and for as a business, I have not had to see a close impact. I've had several friends that have come across it. Thankfully not in my family. I've been pretty blessed that way. As for my employees and whatnot, we've all been hand washing, sanitation. I mean, that was all already part of the business as a bakery, and I'd hope that every restaurant and bakery and fast food, everything that deals with food would be as clean as what we had already been doing prior to COVID. The basic niceties of running an establishment like ours. To see the different implementation of how we treat our customer when they come through the front door with cleaning policies, that all had to change day to day, and we kind of had to keep up with speculation. The plexiglass and stuff that we're going to be bringing in over the next little while will help. It's helped with other businesses from what I understand. We've had to make some changes at the market based on Western Fair Market Association and the Ministry of Health guidelines. It's easy to follow into the protocol that they ask us to as long as it's consistent.
As long as you're taking the necessary precautions, it seems like it's quite achievable to go back to some sort of normalcy as long as everybody's doing their part. The Western Fair Farmers Market, how does that differ from your storefront on the corner there?
Well, we follow the same protocol because it's Ministry of Health. It's not necessarily based on their version of it or our version of it. We're working with the same protocols in both situations.
Any sort of difference in, I don't know if this is a word, but customership from Western Fair and the store?
At first, when we had just the Shopify available for the curbside delivery that we were allowed to do when we reopened, we had a lot of people come to the store. We didn't have the booth at the market open at that point. Mm-hmm. And I kind of regret that decision because I think that we probably did a disservice to ourselves by not being open as a food provider. But we also gave our employees some time off to deal with the crisis itself. How do we deal with this mentally? And I think we all needed that at the beginning. Being able to say we walked away from the market at the beginning, yes, it was a mistake, but we kept our booth there in the long run. As a team at the market, we're all building back together, right? It's never easy in business winning constantly. It's always a struggle week to week.
My dad and I saw this when we were purchasing lumber to build a gazebo this summer. Because of the nature of quarantine, I would imagine people were at home, they were baking themselves more. Did you notice a decline in your customers, not specifically because of wearing masks, a certain number are allowed into businesses, but just the nature of baking in general?
I don't think we noticed a decline in customers really coming through. Our base customers that we always had are great. There were a lot of tourists that would come to the Western Fair Market that I think are less likely to come in to have a coffee and mill around and maybe purchase, so you lose some sales there. But then you learn to make a little less and trim your labor hours, which does suck because then you don't have people employed for as long and they're not able to spend money. It's like a rotating cycle of it can break itself down. So you have to find a way back up to everybody gets their hours back and everybody's working hard again and you're selling at the same level again. That can change based on just 1 week to the next. Like this last week was Thanksgiving, obviously. We had a great time. We worked really hard. We made probably 30-40% more than we would make in a given week. Nice. Because people want those pastries, those tarts, those danishes. All those little pumpkin pastries that we made last week were just amazing. Some weeks you're busier because of the holiday, and you have to prepare for that. Baking's one of those things where it's cyclical. Bakers know we're going to work hardest on those weekends. If they were telling you they're going to hang out with you on Saturday night, they were lying because they were going to go to sleep after they were done their shift. I guarantee.
Being such a integral part of the Old East Village and feeling that sense of community, I was wondering What sort of local sourcing does Artisan Bakery do for its products?
Well, one of our biggest things is that we bring in flour from the Arva Flour Mill, which is local. It's just outside of town on the north end of town, just past the Masonville area. I love that that's part of our building block to what we do. And I think any bakery that's local that's not actually milling their own flour, because there are a few of those that do that, which are great, but that's my closest source of flour where I can get it at a large volume. Mm-hmm. It's now 200 years old, I believe, which is older than our city and our country, which is crazy.
Yeah, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's the oldest water-ran mill in the country.
Yep, that has a dam access right next to it, yes. That's correct.
It went through a little bit of trouble a couple years ago. That guy ran the entire mill himself.
Yeah, Mike's a great guy. He's a hard worker, man.
Sounds like he's a baller.
Very much so. Big family man, will help you through anything. And he constantly is saying, now that he can't deliver to me, make sure you bring me bread and whatever pastries or donuts you have left. I go out to the mill once every couple of weeks now. He's always wanting something back from the places that he provides to as well.
Yeah, not only is it pleasant, but it does create that sort of sense of community, that camaraderie.
Absolutely.
What would you say is the most selling product that you sell at the bakery?
Sourdoughs or meat pies, the 1-2 punch. That's what we're known for, are our savory meat pies, and those sourdoughs that are made with a culture that's, I believe, 9 years old come this December. That's been active through 3 major bakers that have passed it on. Theo had a young lady that worked in Switzerland who mastered the art of baking both in Canada and Germany, and then practiced in the mountains of Switzerland to try to bake the hardest form of sourdough you can possibly do, because it's like opposite of sea level, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at sourdoughs, you've got like the San Francisco where you're right on the sea level. You can bake a beautiful sourdough any day of the week. And then you go to Switzerland, you're high in the mountains. Is the exact opposite effect on how your dough works. So she studied under kind of both worlds, and she created our sourdough. Her name's Megan. She's quite a nice young lady. And she passed that on to my Uncle Richard. And then that's been passed on to myself now, because he's retired from baking and gone on to just finish on his last couple of years before full retirement.
You could sort of relate it to like a beer master or someone who studies their craft in such a way that they know that deep information. I have 2 cousins who live in Scotland that own a brewery, the Williams Brothers Brewery. They stumbled upon a recipe for beer like 20, 30 years ago that is one of the oldest recipes in the UK, where they make it with heather. And ever since then, they've just expanded their knowledge more and more, employed the help of beer masters. I can sort of see how baking is like that too.
If somebody somewhere in Samaria, Phoenicia, or Egypt accidentally dumped a pile of yeasted beer into flour, and then that somehow got cooked, that's how bread that's leavened was basically created. It was a mistake. You went from having the naan bread or the pita that was, it's just salt and water and oil and flour, and you can make flour or bread, in the same ways as you make beer. You can choose your styles of ingredients and go from the Pilsner straight through to the stouts, right? Mm-hmm. It all depends on what you're adding, right?
Along the same lines, Guinness was an accident. Arthur Guinness was going to brew a much lighter beer, and what ended up happening is a bunch of his product got cooked too hot. So a lot of the ingredients were so, carbonized that he's like, well, I spent all this money on these ingredients.
Yeah.
So I might as well just continue the process. And it was a dark stout. He's just like, I'm just going to go with it.
And today it's made with molasses, so that it has a thick, rich blackstrap molasses flavor, right? Mm-hmm. Again, mistakes in history have caused us to do all sorts of things with science, and it's changed how we do things, right?
For sure. What product did you find was a lot harder to make than you anticipated?
Wow, that's a good one. Cookies. I'll
Really?
be honest. I have a really great staff that has taught me how to make cookies. They make better cookies than I do to this day, but I think that baking definitely has a lot more to it than just your average cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Cooking's a great base, but baking has so many elements of perfect science to it. That's you really have to follow not just a recipe, but you have to follow the method. I think a lot of people forget that the method in baking is sometimes more important than the product itself.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely cookies for my personal self. I think at the bakery as a whole, our stollen that we make at Christmas, because it's an elaborate product. But again, it's the method that it's made in. It takes almost 10 hours to make a batch, so you put a lot of love and, well, a lot of butter into it. So
You were talking about that exact science and the process. I, as a hobby, make mead, which is a honey wine. Honey, water mixed with yeast. You add some fruit, protein for the yeast to eat.
sugar consumption, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It takes me about 30 days before I rack it to another bottle for 1 gallon. But it goes to what you're saying is you have to follow the process to a T, like heat it up to this temperature and then add the yeast at this time when it's at this temperature. And it's just, you have to fine tune it to get it right because, you know, if you're off just a little bit, it can vary the result quite considerably.
I think that's why vinegar was accidentally made by having wine be at the off temperature when it was in process and then overexposed to air. So the difference between wine and vinegar, you have something that people revere and drink happily, and then another one that people only drink to cure their liver and or wash floors, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a crazy world when the science is that close. I mean, you could either kill and blind somebody with moonshine that's too powerful, or it could be the perfect glass of scotch.
So, in this new world that we live in, with certain things being legal, does the Artisan Bakery offer any or plan to offer any edibles?
No. The reason why is I do myself partake in that type of edible fun. I believe that preserving the art of baking, which is our motto, is preserving the art of traditional baking. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't exclude edibles in our country, because as you know, I smoke weed, have been a weed advocate, and a heavy supporter of moving that industry along over the last 20 years. I've been following Mark Emery at CCHQ for probably the better part of 25 years. And I believe that we should have edibles available to the public. But I also believe that if you're an establishment that makes food for the public, that edibles should be a separate part of that. And so if you're going to do that, you should do that as a separate facility. It's almost how I feel about gluten-free baking versus regular baking, is that if we're going to provide a gluten-free product, call it gluten-wise if it's in a bakery like myself, because I work with potentially more flour than any other type of bakery. There's atomized flour in the air, so there's the ability for it to be there. With edibles, with the cross-contamination of THC on the bench to something else, is still a concern. And again, I mentioned cleaning earlier. We're a very clean facility. If we use nuts, we're cleaning those surfaces. We're throwing away those liners that are used for nut products. So the same kind of allergy or separation that you'd have for weed, you don't want to be serving somebody weed that doesn't want to be smoking it / ingesting it. Mm-hmm. And so they should be done in separate facilities. And I believe Sarah is her name at Backroads Bakery and Tavern. It's going to be at the Old Regis, which is just at Adelaide and Dundas. I believe she'll be doing something where she's baking that off-site in a separate facility. So I hope she does well with it, but I don't feel like it's my purpose to get into space cakes or what you would see in Amsterdam. I do have Dutch background. I've been there. It's all fun and games and good, but that's not what I serve. I'm here to serve families that want a good traditional sourdough, wholesome meat pie. If you want to go home and smoke some weed and do some edibles with my baked goods that you have, you can have a good baked day.
Totally. That's a good point. I was actually thinking it's sort of like how on the back of chocolate bars you'll see, like, this was made in a peanut-free facility. And
correct, yeah.
It's been awesome talking to you, man. It's great catching up. And if people want to check out the Artisan Bakery, they can go to the corner of King once it hits the curve, right?
I think so. I think it's Ontario and Dundas. At the Western Fair Market parking lot is a good spot to stop at. You can visit our local shops like Ilberry Goose, The Lab, The Hungry Butcher, myself, Bread and Roses Bookstore. We're all right along that block there.
And they can also check out artisanbakery.ca.
That's correct.
And on Facebook, Artisan Bakery LDN as well.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you.
Take care.
You can check me out on Instagram and TikTok at Scott_loves_puns. Puns is with a Z. You can find me on YouTube by searching Scott Loves Puns _ASMR. You can check out my audiobook and my new comedy EP, Okayest Hits, which both are on sale for only $2 and $1 at swaudio.bandcamp.com. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good night.